The galactic station hummed with its usual symphony of alien life. Clicks, whistles, low thrums, and high glassy harmonics blended into a soundscape that would drive most unaugmented humans straight into sensory overload. Lisa had once flinched at every sharp trill and metallic chirp. But 3 years as the sole human maintenance technician on outpost Kepler 9 had turned the chaos into something almost comforting. The station's noises were proof that life messy, stubborn, resilient was still going. Her quarters were a cramped cube tucked between the waste recycling sector and the botanical gardens. Officially, she'd been offered more appropriate accommodations, a spacious suite in the diplomatic wing, complete with filtered lighting and sound-dampening fields. Unofficially, she'd declined almost before the station administrator finished the sentence. The diplomatic wing meant ambassadors, officers, and curious visitors with endless questions about Earth and how it felt to be the only one of your kind here. The little cube by the recyclers meant privacy, a shorter walk to the maintenance shafts, and far fewer eyes on what she did with her off-duty time. Today had been brutal, even by station standards. 12 hours crawling through narrow ventilation conduits, mag clumps scraping along alloy walls as she inched forward. Oxidation had chewed away at a series of coolant lines in a section where the station's own engineers couldn't reach to big, too bulky inside their protective exoskeletons. It always came down to Lisa, the one sapient who could squeeze her soft, flexible human body into spaces designed for cables, not people. Now, back in her quarters, her muscles ached with a deep, exhausted throb. Her coveralls were streaked with coolant residue and smeared with station dust, and her stomach was a hollow ache that growled loud enough to be picked up by nearby sensors. She shrugged out of the coveralls, rolled up her sleeves, and went to the tiny counter bolted to one wall. From the storage compartment beneath it, she pulled out her treasure, real garlic, its papery skins rustling faintly against her fingers. Actual butter, grown from cultured animal cells and smuggled in among experimental lipids on a supply manifest. A small bundle of fresh basil from the hydroponics bay, where she'd secretly planted earth seeds between rows of station-approved algae. A little vial of olive oil from a trade convoy that owed her a favor. These were contraband only in the bureaucratic sense, technically allowed, practically discouraged. Unnecessary luxury imports. The logistics I had once called them. To Lisa, they were lifelines. The station's protein dispensers could produce nutritionally perfect meals. Balanced amino acid chains, micronutrients tailored to each species. Texture modules designed for maximum efficiency. The output always had the same faint metallic undertone, the same just barely off scent that screamed manufactured. You ate it, you lived, but you didn't feel anything. Real cooking was different. It was time and attention and a tiny bit of rebellion. She set her portable heating element to medium, its indicator light pulsing a soft blue, and placed her precious little pan on top. Olive oil shimmered as it warmed. Lisa crushed the garlic with the flat of her knife, the familiar motion easing something tight in her chest. When the pieces hit the pan, they sizzled immediately, releasing that unmistakable aroma, sharp, warm, and utterly, defiantly human. Cherry tomatoes followed, plucked from a small container labeled botanical study samples. They hissed as they met the heat, skins blistering, juice bursting out to mingle with the oil and garlic. The air in her quarters shifted, the sterile recycled atmosphere taking on weight and warmth. In a tiny pot balanced beside the pan, water boiled. She dropped in fresh pasta she'd painstakingly made by hand the previous rest day, kneading dough on her narrow bunk and cutting uneven strands with a dull knife. It had been ridiculous, time-consuming, and worth every moment. The scent blossomed through the cube. Garlic, tomato, basil, wheat, earth, wrapped in steam. She was so focused on stirring, tasting, adjusting, that she didn't notice when her door's proximity sensor softly activated. The first hint she had of company was a quiet, musical chittering at her back. Lisa turned, spoon still in hand, and froze. 3 Quarksian cubs hovered in the doorway, pressed up against the frame as far as station regulations allowed. Their crystalline eyes 6 each, arranged in a gentle arc were wide and unblinking. Their fur-covered snouts twitched rapidly, drinking in every molecule of scent that reached the corridor. Quarksians were small, barely a meter tall even as adults, with 6 limbs that could serve as arms or legs as needed. Their bodies were covered in dense, silvery fur that shifted color with their emotions, a constantly shifting aurora of feeling. Right now, all 3 cubs glowed a soft amber, curiosity edged with something Lisa couldn't quite name. "Oh," Lisa said, startled but not unkind. "Hello there." She recognized them in a vague way from the station's residential rosters and the occasional glimpse in the corridors. Quarksians were a species in recovery. Their homeworld was still rebuilding after a devastating plague that had nearly wiped out their population. These particular cubs and their family were refugees, granted sanctuary aboard Kepler 9 until their people could reclaim their world. The smallest cub stepped forward, clearly mustering courage. Lisa remembered his name from the maintenance logs that tracked habitat adjustments. Rex. In his 4 upper limbs, he held a bowl. It wasn't a standard station-issue bowl, printed from generic composites. It was something homemade, carved from compressed plant fibers. Tiny etched patterns covered its surface stars, looping lines. Rough shapes that might have been vines or waves. The etchings were uneven but careful, each line placed with obvious attention. "Please," Rex said in halting universal standard. The translator implant at his throat clicked faintly as it worked. The device clearly designed for adult vocal tracks, not cub physiology. "Food smells like." He trailed off, searching for words, but his fur told the story for him. Amber brightened toward gold, streaks of green weaving through it. Hope, anticipation, longing. Behind him, the other 2 cubs raised their own bowls, nearly identical in make. 3 homemade bowls, 3 hopeful faces, 3 vibrating sets of whiskers. Lisa's heart clenched. Her gaze flicked from their bowls to her pan. Enough pasta for one very hungry, very tired human. Definitely not enough for 3 growing alien children whose calorie requirements she didn't even know for sure. "You know this might not be safe for you, right?" she said gently. "Human food could make you sick." The glow in Rex's fur dimmed, shifting toward dull gray. Disappointment. He hugged the bowl closer to his chest. "We eat many things," he said earnestly. "On homeworld, before plague, we eat." He paused, fur flickering in memory. "Grandmother made food. Hot food, smells like yours. Not dispenser food. Real food." The way he said real hit Lisa harder than any tired muscle. Understanding washed over her, fast and sharp. This wasn't just about hunger. They were homesick. Homesick in a way that processed protein blocks and perfectly balanced nutrient gels could never touch. She made her decision in the time it took a tomato bubble to burst. "Come in," Lisa said, stepping back from the doorway. "Sit, if you like." The cubs scrambled in at once, their small claws clicking softly on the floor. They settled in a cluster near the tiny table, bowls clutched like relics. Lisa grabbed her tablet, fingers moving quickly as she pulled up Quarksian dietary profiles from the station's medical database. Compatible proteins. Check. No toxins in tomatoes or basil for their species. Check. Garlic flagged as intense, but non-harmful. Butter and olive oil acceptable in small quantities. She exhaled in relief. "Okay," she said softly, more to herself than to them. "We can make this work." She divided the pasta. What had been one generous portion became for modest servings, each bowl filled carefully, making sure the cubs' portions were as full as she dared leave them, without leaving herself entirely empty. From the back of the storage unit, she retrieved a tiny wedge of Parmesan she'd been hoarding for months, shaving off fine, fragrant curls over each bowl. A drizzle of herb-infused olive oil completed the dish, the fragrance intensifying into something almost sacred. The cubs stared at their bowls with reverence, fur shimmering in slow waves of color. "Blow on it," Lisa demonstrated, exhaling gently across the surface of her pasta. "It's hot. You don't want to burn your tongues." They mimicked her immediately, their small breaths sending faint ripples over the pasta. Rex took the first cautious bite. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then his fur exploded into brilliant gold, brighter than Lisa had ever seen, shot through with quick flashes of emerald, blue, rose, and sun-bright white. Joy, astonishment, nostalgia, gratitude feelings cascaded across his body like a living light show. The other two cubs dove in, their own fur patterns erupting in kaleidoscopic delight. The cramped quarters filled with soft chittering, the clink of carved bowls, the quiet, eager sounds of eating. Lisa took her own bite, savoring the familiar comfort of garlic and tomato and basil, but found more pleasure in simply watching them. "Your grandmother," Lisa said between bites, glancing at Rex. "What did she make?" Rex's translator struggled with the nuance, clipping and stuttering, but his gestures were universal. He mimed stirring a pot, sprinkling something, then offering it outward. His fur softened to a warm, steady gold threaded with gentle blue. "Warm grain," he managed, "from our fields, with—" he gestured toward the tomatoes, "sweet pods, from vine." She sang while cooking. Song made air different. Made food. He searched again, then finished simply. Made it love. Lisa's throat tightened. "Yeah," she whispered. "Food can be love." They finished eating in the kind of comfortable silence that only truly good meals create. The kind that glues people together more firmly than words. When the bowls were empty, the cubs cleaned them meticulously with their dexterous tongues, then hugged them to their chests once more. "Thank you, Lisa Hume," Rex said formally, using her full name as Quarksians often did when they meant something deeply. His fur had settled into a deep, peaceful blue with threads of contented green. Was not just food, was memory, was home. After they left, Lisa sat in her quiet quarters, her own stomach only half full, but her chest full to overflowing with a warmth that had nothing to do with the heating element. Her tablet pinged, one message on the station's common channel, then another, then 5 more. Parents, guardians, older siblings, juveniles from 3 other species, a young meth from the methane sectoral reclusive species. She'd never seen visit the mixed species lounge sent a hesitant text, carefully translated. The wording varied, but the intent was the same. We heard the human cooked real food. Could she cook again? Could they bring their bowls? Lisa looked at her remaining supplies. A few cloves of garlic, half a bundle of basil, a dwindling stash of olive oil. Nowhere near enough for the 20 names already appearing in her message queue. She did a quick mental calculation of her savings and the hazard pay bonus she'd just earned from crawling into those oxidized vents. Then she smiled. She opened a new request to the station quartermaster, flagging it as urgent. Real ingredients, the expensive ones. Grains, vegetables, herbs, oils, spices. Whatever the station's supply lines could support. She added a note that her deductions could be taken from her entire month's bonus, plus whatever overtime she had coming. Tomorrow, she decided she'd cook for 20. The next week, maybe 40. And she wouldn't just feed them. She'd teach them. Anyone who wanted to learn how to stir and taste and adjust until the air felt like home. Because somewhere between Rex's first bite and his last glowing thank you, she had realized something profound. Humanity's greatest export wasn't their technology, or their diplomacy, or their infuriating resilience. It was the quiet, revolutionary act of turning sustenance into communion, of transforming what keeps you alive into what reminds you who you are. It was the stubborn insistence that food could carry memories, that a shared meal could stitch together refugees and wanderers into something like a family. Rex returned twice more that week, bowl in hand, fur glowing a little brighter each time. And each time Lisa ladled out another serving. She felt the station around her grow just a little less like an outpost in the void, and a little more like home.